Ko Rachel Toko Ingoa, ko Oti Koromatua Whakatū no Maharu Mai. We are resuming our council meeting from last Thursday. We've got a few items still to conclude. We're going to be moving through this reasonably quickly, elected members, because you've had the agenda for quite some time. I've had no questions sent through to me in relation to the items on the agenda subsequently. So I am going to start with...
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. I sent my questions through ahead of the 23rd of September meeting, so I sent them through on like the 20th.
Which agenda item was that, Councillor? We'll come to them as we go through the agenda items.
Yeah, I can let you know if you like.
Or that's okay. That's fine. So as we go through them, as long as they're on the agenda, we'll cover them off. Okay, but I've had no new ones since then. So since we commenced, right, starting off, I'm on my run sheet. First up is we have the Mayor's report, which is in... Oh, apologies first. Thank you, Elaine. So we have apologies to receive for today. From Councillor Rainey and Councillor Fulton. I will move, seconded by Councillor Bowes-Walter. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Then we're on to the normal order of business, I think, is going to be set out with Mayor's reports. There's a status report item that we need to bring in on adoption of the Treasury Management Report that Ms McDonald and Mr Laverdis will speak to. Then we've got the Central Library decision making on 136141. Then we've got the Uniquely Nelson Annual Report 142173. And what I'm arranging with Mr Duffy and Mr Butler is we'll do the receipt of that report, and I'm going to get them back to the October meeting because I'd actually like to give them a really good slot on the agenda to talk about how things are going with all the COVID impacts and everything else. I want to give that city centre, the focus on the city centre, so I don't want to rush that. So today will be just the mechanic of the annual report, and we'll get them back in October to have a bigger session with us. And then we've got the Strategic Development and Property Quarterly Report to receive, and again, that's just a receiving process. And then we've got a couple of items to deal with in confidential, so we're going to move reasonably quickly. Okay, Mayor's report is on pages 83 through 87 of your agenda. I'll hand over to Deborah, who's going to just very quickly give you a précis of the submission that's attached.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through the Chair, just very, very quickly to confirm to you that the positions expressed in this pro forma submission do reflect conversations that have taken place in the elections sector nationally and conversations that we've been aware of here in Nelson over some time, and very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any questions for Deborah? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. So in regards to what you've got, as we're covering the Mayor's report in regards to the retrospective submission to Internal Affairs about Mary Woods. So I'm just trying to understand, I've read it through, but what are we saying that we are of the view that binding poll and general wards should not be retained? Is that what we're basically saying, or is it more than that?
Could you just repeat those words, councillors, that what should not be...
Page 87, for 87, example, yeah. And I see there's various issues, and I'm just trying to get my head around what they are. For example, we're basically, I'll get to explain, what are we retrospectively saying?
Okay, Deborah, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Sorry, yes, hanging out behind you here, my apologies. And through the Chair, very quickly, so when the Minister of Local Government announced the changes to the Local Electoral Act in February of this year, there were two phases to take place to that. The first of which was the bill that was then implemented in early March, which allowed for Māori wards to be established without the mandatory community polls. And this is the second phase. So there are 6 further areas where the establishment of general wards and Māori wards are not aligned in the Local Electoral Act, and DIA are seeking feedback on how the sector thinks that should be addressed. So that's the 6 issues that you see in front of you here.
Thank you.
Chair, so I'm still trying to understand. So phase 2 is, aligning. when you're saying aligning, it's
Yeah, so there have been a number of ways in which the establishment of a general ward under the Local Electoral Act and a Māori ward have been quite different and distinct. And the intention is to look at perhaps making those a little bit more consistent with one another, but feedback is being sought as to how the local government sector thinks that could work.
so through the chair. In regards to issue 5 and issue 6, which is page 86 and page 87, are we saying that we don't want these to be looked at again or given an opportunity to be looked again by the public? Is that what you're saying?
So speaking very quickly to issue 6 first, because that's the smallest one. So there are actually currently under the Act, there is still the option for a mandatory poll in relation to general wards, and we're suggesting that that actually be removed as well as the already removed clauses around Māori wards. So we're achieving full alignment there, and no local government authority to anyone's knowledge has ever used that clause under the Act anyway, so it's been shown to be somewhat redundant. In terms of issue 5, it's just aiming to provide a little bit more clarity as to what happens in the event that a council wants to disestablish a Māori ward if there's one that's been previously established. And also there's not a huge amount of clarity in the Act at the moment. So currently, once a Māori ward is first established, it's in place for the following 2 elections. So for Nelson, just using us as an example, through until after the 2025 election now. But there's a little bit of a grey area as to what happens then. Does it just roll on? Do you need to specifically readdress it? And so that's one of the issues that's being commented on as well.
Thank you.
So, sorry, through the chair, so that's meaning, so what's our stance? And from reading the letter and reading these issues, what is our stance that we're retrospectively seeing through, that we're saying that it does roll on, or it comes up for a review, it's not automatically?
Sure. So the proposed view that's being put forward in the documents here is that there's a full alignment with essentially the general wards of the representation process, which means that it would need to be considered by councils at least every 6 years, but with the option to consider more often.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, it's just aligning the 2, but in 6 years, we as a council would then need to reassess the wards, having a separate Māori ward or other wards, etc., whether we continue.
Yes, yeah.
That'll be decided at the table or with the public, as in the past, the referendum.
Yeah, so through the chair, it means that the Māori ward and general ward processes would all be run essentially through an extended representation review process. So this time around, and previously they've been 2 separate contributors into representation. Māori wards need to be dealt with first, and then the more general representation factors have come second traditionally, and the proposal is to incorporate those within the same time frame.
Thank you. All right, thank you. I'm going to move the recommendations in the report to receive and approve, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any further questions or debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. Now we go to this council status report, pages 88 through 100, and Ms McDonald or Mr Laverdis just have some additional information on an item that's been missed. Verbal update.
So through the chair, I think one of the items that was left off of the status report was the issue relating to the council resolution that was passed on the 24th of June that noted a request for a report on the potential cost, scope and high-level implications. It's quite a lengthy recommendation through the chair, but it relates to forestry, and it should have been on the status report. Would you like me to read the whole thing out for completeness, or just to give you? No,
I think we recall what it is. It's the review. So thank you.
And in terms of the progress of that, so I am busy working to fulfill the recommendation. I'm hoping to get a report to the December Forestry Subcommittee to advise the subcommittee on the potential costs for that report. I'm noting that I just have to, the work has to be undertaken in the 21-22 financial year, our current financial year, in time for it to advise the Forestry Activity Management Plan and Treasury Management Plan. So we're on a process. First thing is a report to the subcommittee on the costs, then to commission that work, and then for that to guide the next Forestry Activity Management Plan.
Thank you for that update. Any questions in relation to the status report as a whole? Councillor Sanson.
Is it just possible to have the update circulated in a written form? I'm assuming it should normally have been in the status report in a written form. So if we could just have a written update circulated, that would be appreciated. Thanks.
It will be in the minutes. Right, that's right. But I'm sure that the officers won't mind putting a paragraph to that. Thank you, Mr. Levitas. Any other questions? In that case, someone care to move? Councillor Skinner.
Just thank you for that. Mr. Levitas, the options for a climatorium. I see the officers have met with Wakatu Incorporated to discuss the project ongoing, and I see that's going to be continual back and forth. Is this tying this? Cheers. Can you give any more detail on that? Is that sort of tying us into some financial contribution of more than?
Through the chair, no, not at all. It was a preliminary discussion to hear how Wakatu is moving things ahead. The commitment is for council to be part of those discussions, no financial or other commitment, and we'll be coming back to council once we have more information.
And just clarification, it's Wakatu Incorporation's build their project, but they're seeking us just for alignment with our buildings nearby. Is that pretty much, was it in regards to put on the construction or the design?
It's probably too early even to talk about things like a build. At the moment, they're really just scoping what the project could be and what it could deliver. And certainly they are taking the lead, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. Because it's a status report about big things that council is doing, I can't help but wonder when or where we're going to get an update on the Pride crossing. I know that's wouldn't come to this. Well, I presume it wouldn't come to this committee. It would go to Works Infrastructure, but
It's infrastructure. It's not on my agenda, so I'm just going to be consistently given time. It's not an agenda item for this committee, so we'll deal with it on the right agenda.
okay. Could I just?
So there's no issue. It's just I'm really pressed for time, and I'm being really clear about that. I can't introduce things that are not on the agenda to a meeting.
I'd like to express my concern at the lack of an update in recent times on
Well, you need to address that to the infrastructure chair, not to me as mayor. I've moved the status report, seconded by Councillor Noonan. Any further questions? No further questions. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye, against, carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to the Nelson Central Library decision-making timeline, page 136 of your agenda. And Mr. White is here to speak to this item. Whenever you're ready, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this item is relatively self-explanatory. I think it's about the resolutions that council passed in its long-term plan decision-making about the library, which decision-gated at least the early decisions with the library project. And it decision-gated a number of decisions behind completing the land exchange negotiations with Wakatu Incorporation. And as we've worked through the project timeline or program timeline and considered how that might play out, we've realised that actually we have potentially quite a significant void in community engagement in particular, but also a void in actually working through a number of the other processes that are required to progress this project. So this recommendation is basically to change the resolution from the time gating behind the land exchange negotiations to do work concurrently with the land exchange negotiations. Now, in saying that, so I think the report itself is reasonably clear. The resolution or the recommendation that I made was maybe not so clear, in that it said retained the wording, confirms that on completion of negotiations, should not have been there in the recommendation. It confirms that the recommendation is that that you confirm that those other processes can run in parallel with the land negotiations.
All right, thank you, Andrew. So excuse me, what you're saying is those words were not in the original, the ones that are now in red and crossed out.
That is
right?
correct.
Okay, so and then because it's covered below. All right, opening for questions, Councillor Sense, and then Councillor Laurie, and somebody else signalled to me too.
Thanks. So I'm just foreshadowing that I may have an amendment. So I've got, thank you through the chair, I've got two questions. The first one is under part 2 of the recommendation. What is the level of risk of incurring unrecoverable or sunk costs if the work outlined in that clause is undertaken before the outcome of land negotiations is known?
Through you, Madam Chair, thanks for the question. It's a really good one. And it's always a risk with projects like this, which particularly when they're significant scale projects. But there is no question, I don't think, in Council's mind that this project will not be delivered. There is a question around the negotiations in terms of the land exchange, that we have to conclude a successful land exchange for that site to be used. You'll recall that you also have a backup resolution that if that negotiation cannot be concluded successfully, then your backup is we come back with an options report based on the second preferred option, which is the current library site. So we're being very careful through this process that work around community engagement, for example, is not about the site, it's about the library. So it's function over form, the approach that we're taking at the moment. So on the basis of the site, I don't think there's a significant risk around wasted investment because it's function over form that we're looking at.
Thank you. So my subsequent question then is that I would like to request, and I've sent through an amendment to the governance advisors, that we to request that we undertake an independent climate-related financial risk assessment in relation to the project, given that we are looking at exchanging land that is subject to climate change impacts. And as there is not yet legislation in place that adequately covers climate-related impacts, it's like we had, fire inspections before we had fire safety built into the building code. So I'm wondering if it's possible to have that amendment.
Councillor Sampson, can I just ask you a question? Why didn't you send it before the meeting, and first question, and why didn't you send it to me as chair? And third question, why didn't you send it to Mr. White, who's the reporting as the officer?
Because I've just been working on it this morning, since I got into council.
But it's very easy to add in. It's very easy, councillor, to add in the names into the email. Surely, was that an error?
I only sent it through. How long ago? I've only just.
But my question is, why didn't you send it to Mr. White and myself, and ideally the chief executive? Was that just a mistake not to add us into the address list when you sent it?
Because you're all in the room with us, and I've just literally finished it and sent it a few minutes ago, 5 minutes or less. So
yes, we're all in the room with our devices. Mr. White's got his, I've got mine, chief executive's got his. So they haven't had a chance to look at that, or we haven't had a chance to look at it.
It's fine. I'm happy to take an adjournment.
Well, I'm not happy to take an adjournment because it's heading at 12 on a busy day. So, Mr. White, can you have a look at that? Will I take some other questions, please? Or the Chief Executive take a look at that? Will I take some other questions?
Can we have it put up on the board?
Not. I want to take some questions first, and we'll get to that in a moment. Robin may be able to put it up on the board, but I want to keep on going with the meeting. Any other questions, Councillor Noonan?
My question is regarding Councillor Sampson. I think is putting up something that doesn't. This report is just to provide a revised sequential timetable, so it doesn't sort of seem to fit from what I'm hearing. This particular item, I think that might be something for another day.
I think it might be something that was already debated when we got to the flood matters as well, which were previously resolved. But I'll just get some advice from the Chief Executive and Mr. White in a moment. I don't want to waste a lot of time with something that's not going to be related to the report we're dealing with, the problem. Any other questions? Councillor Laurie?
Thank you. Just on this idea that we're going to start this work before we've completed our negotiations, is there a concern that, or is there any concern that the perception that creates may in some way, compromise or weaken our negotiating position?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't think so. This is really about dealing with a void in our engagement with our community around a project which is actually really significant for the community, and it could be a void that potentially could be 6 months. And I think that's my recommendation is based on. I think that is a long time to not be in an engaged process with our community around this significant project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can pop that up, Robin. I'm just going to go, there's a matter that's this additional wording from Councillor Sampson that you'll see come up on the screen in a moment, so I'll just wait for that, and then I'm going to go to the Chief Executive for advice in relation to what's been put up on the screen.
Sure. And can I just clarify why?
No, I'd really like to get some advice from the Chief Executive, because
Sure.
that's actually...
Or I could ask a question, because actually maybe a question might clarify whether it's even relevant at this point or not.
Well, I need to take advice from the Chief Executive if it's relevant or not, but if you want to pose your question now, we'll try and deal with this in one go.
Okay, thanks. So through the chair, when I read this report and I read these recommendations, it reads to me like we are accelerating the library redevelopment process before we've completed the land negotiations. And given that we are doing this in a location that is subject to climate change impacts at some point in the future, I felt that it was really important that we ensure we are undertaking due diligence around this whole process. It's, we're talking $45 million.
And the question is, Councillor Sampson?
Yeah, so is that the intent of this resolution, that it runs council work in this process at the same time as library as the land exchange, so that we're kind of accelerating what we had decided through the long-term plan, so we're accelerating that process.
Could you just answer what you mean by this work? This work being what work?
So we have a recommendation in front of us which outlines a whole lot of things. Community engagement process, project management, governance approach, procurement process, financial management, reporting and approvals process, the proposed new library building and landscaping, noting that this work will run in parallel with land exchange negotiations. So effectively, before we've completed the land negotiations, we are actually commencing council's body of work on this. And so
it's what Mr. White's already run through.
Tension, I think we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence about climate-related financial risk.
All right, so I was clear, Mr. White, you want to talk about what you've got there, and then I'll go to the Chief Executive about the other part.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's no underlying agenda around the site in this recommendation. This recommendation is fully related to being able to proceed on non-site-based pieces of work that relate to the library program. So all of these pieces of work support us to be able to progress the project around the library development, and they are not site-based pieces of work.
Thank you. Chief Executive, relation to the words in red.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I suppose I feel a strong sense of deja vu when I see these words. The only word that's extra here is financial. So we've, as part of the long-term plan, we did flood modelling of this site, and it was described by Damien from Tonkin and Taylor as New Zealand leading in terms of the work that we were doing in terms of the risk assessment. We also looked at access to the site and flooding frequency over the next 100 years and how much the road outside would have to be raised to maintain reliable access, 600 millimetres, I think, over 100 years, which is a reseal every 10 years. And most recently, we've looked at making sure there are no adverse impacts on adjoining sites. So we have done a comprehensive, independent, climate-related risk assessment. And I just feel that there is with all due respect, despite the council's decisions to move forward on this project, we're just having extra hurdles put in our way. And I see nothing that would come out of this that we haven't already answered, that hasn't been asked and answered many times by independent experts.
Right, thank you. And I do think this is the matter that it goes back to where we were last Thursday when we received the other report, and that would be it was canvassed at that stage, and we determined that we were satisfied with what was there. So I think we've already been around this. So unless there's going to be a second, I'm going to move what is in the report with the change with the original one on the screen. So I will move that. Do I have a seconder for what's in the report? Thank you, Councillor Noonan.
Say I foreshadowed that I had an amendment.
Yes, you did, but you can't foreshadow an amendment if you haven't had something moved already, Councillor. So I've moved.
Oh, okay.
So if you now want to move an amendment, you'll need to do so now.
Okay, well, I'd like to move the amendment that I've got up there.
Right, is there any seconders for that amendment? Councillor O'Neill Stevens is seconding that. Right, we'll deal with that first. Any other questions on the substantive report? Happy with the substantive report? Any other questions on the substantive report? Councillor Skinner,
Thank you.
you've got questions on the substantive report?
Substantive, thank you. So where we've got the line through and through Andrew, you've got there the line through on completion of negotiations. I know you've explained it. I'm still conscious of that. We put that in for good reason, confirms that on completion of negotiations, that wasn't put there as an afterthought, that was intent. And I know you say there's a bit of a void there in trying to get some negotiations or discussions with community, etc. on it. I'm still not completely satisfied that this is not going to be seen by the public, that we're sort of fast tracking this, and B, I'm still feel that that was good reason that we initially put that on completion of negotiations, that we would then take that next step. Can you further put my mind at ease that this is not us jumping the gun in regards to public understanding what we're going to have there? The negotiations with Wakatu Incorporated in regards to them obviously coming up with a favourable deal for us. I feel we put that there to sort of remove risk.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll just reiterate what I said before. So the negotiations is site-based negotiations. The remainder of that is around function-based. So what is it that is going to be provided through this library development for our community? So my recommendation is that they're actually quite different things. The negotiations are around site and nothing else. And the remainder is around what are we going to provide through this development for our community.
Thank you.
With that? Right, thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Now we've got an amendment that's been moved and seconded. Speaking to the amendment, Councillor. Oh, question from Councillor very quickly.
Sorry, just resolution number 4, as in page 137, that was approved at the council, which is the one we're looking to amend. So my recollection from that meeting is because I suggested a number of those amendments. And so I'm just wondering if if the original intention, because that clause changed quite a lot, what the original intention was from that May meeting, because I just have a feeling, could be wrong, I haven't checked, that really it was only just like the community engagement was in there and none of the financial management sides were in there, and they were added. And yeah, do you recall what was original versus what we added at the meeting?
Through you, Madam Chair, not explicitly, but I do agree with you that there was significant discussion in the chamber around this, and I think a lot of it came from Councillor Brand's comment around process and good process with the library development. So you did spend a lot of time working this through around the key decision points that you wanted. So without being specific about what was in there prior, I think you're certainly correct that a lot was added in.
Okay, thank you. I think we've captured it. All right, speaking to the amendment, Councillor Sensen, then Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thank you through the chair. So I guess first of all, I feel like climate change adaptation, how we respond to that at a local government and a central government level is a really, really rapidly changing space. And we have information today that we did not have 6 months ago. We have information today that we didn't have 3 weeks ago. But as this is changing, because this is such an enduring and significant investment that we're making, we need to show prudence, due diligence and stewardship around the public funds that we are investing in this community asset. And I think it is absolutely appropriate that we undertake an independent climate-related financial risk assessment in relation to this project in the sites that are being considered, and that informs all of the other decisions and processes and management reporting that flows from this project. It's not designed to halt the project. It is designed to give all of us around the table and the wider community some assurance around the prudence of this and how we can manage and mitigate financial risk in relation to this.
Thank you, Councillor Neil Stevens.
Kia ora. I want to start by acknowledging the Chief Executive outlining the work that's been done today. It's been incredibly comprehensive and has, I think, already put many minds at ease in our community. But we've spoken a lot throughout this process about the importance of bringing the community with us on this. And we've also heard a lot from the community that there still exists concerns, particularly recently, a lot have been raised around insurance retreat. And this is a small but very practical step that we can do to help alleviate those concerns and ensure that the process we're taking is a robust one. A change in the phasing of this project, as we're agreeing, as is on the table today, will increase concerns in the community. And I think a good way to balance that is also providing more due diligence. It was noted that it was a single word change to something that had come up previously, but I think it's quite a significant word change. Financial risk from climate change is significantly different to the great mahi that have been done around flood risk and management. And I really want to emphasize that completing an independent climate-related financial risk assessment doesn't diminish or detract from the work that's already been done. In fact, that work needs to be done to do an assessment like this, and actually it sits very much alongside and uplifts that work. And I just think it will be a small but robust way of further bringing our community with us and giving us the confidence and knowledge in our decision making for what will be one of the most significant capital projects this council has ever embarked on.
Thank you, Councillor Neil Stevens. Councillor Neil Stevens, can I just ask you, had you had any prior discussion around this matter before today's meeting with Councillor Sensen?
No.
It's just today on the fly? Okay, thank you, Councillor Laurie.
Same here. This is all off the top of my head. So I'm speaking in favour of the amendment. When you look at the increasing costs of building in Aotearoa, New Zealand, when you consider the long-term impacts to supply chains of the global pandemic, you would have to be a very brave person to say, this is what this building is going to end up costing. This is what this development is going to end up costing. And I think what Councillor Sanson is putting up may not be convenient right now, but the inconvenient truth is that climate change is presenting us with a whole lot of challenges, and this to me is just one more check. It's running an extra ruler over what we're doing, particularly in light of the concerns that we will have read about in the media about insurance. That makes sense to me. Given the scale, given how long this development is going to last, I don't really see at this stage of the game why we wouldn't do this. So that's why I'm supporting it.
I'm just calling for a division, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Laurie. I'm going to go 3-3 on this, and I'm going to speak against what is here. We talk about good process and due diligence and appropriate things, but in fact, councillors are now speaking on new steps on a major project on the fly, literally on the fly, with no advice other than, specifically to that matter, other than the advice that I've heard today, which is from the Chief Executive. This matter was canvassed fully in the last report. We've already gone through this. We already had all the insurance retreat questions. We put those to the experts. We went through that process. Toby said to us, no, I'm satisfied that we are doing appropriate due diligence.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Sorry, misrepresentation. I don't believe that Toby Kay is a climate-related financial risk assessment expert. I believe he's an engineer, and that all information that has been presented to this table to date has been around flooding risk, not around climate-related financial risk.
So I'm not going to uphold your point of order, because what I'm saying is what I heard from Mr. Kane. Whether you don't appreciate his qualifications is a different issue. So what I heard him talk about is the Deep South challenge and the fact that he felt that we were taking all the necessary steps. I also heard from Tonkin and Taylor from Damien that he was satisfied that we were taking those steps. And what I've heard is that this will be done again as we go through the process. So the model will be run again as we work our way through all of those steps. It's not a one step. Mr. Levertis made it very clear we will do this again as we go through. So we are belts and braces working our way through all of this process. If council wants to take an approach where you are going to run a you want to take an approach where you're going to halt the work until you have reached a level of where you need assessment on all of these things for all of your projects, then you can put the Kaingaora housing project on hold. If you decide you want to go ahead, any of the spatial plan matters throughout.
Point of order,
the whole thing, in my opinion.
Representation, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, it's not misrepresentation.
Yeah,
it is my opinion about what you would be doing.
It says up there, will run in parallel, so there's no attempt to halt this project.
Oh, no, Councillor Sanson, you're interrupting me before I'm finished. And
well, I'm going to do another point of order. My point of order is the Kaingaora project is completely different because it's
I'm not going to uphold your point of order.
Kaingaora, it's about relevance.
I'm not talking. I'm giving you a context setting for this, and it is my opinion on that. And when I speak in debate, I'm allowed to talk in my opinion. I am absolutely satisfied that we are working through for this project an appropriate mechanism. And if you're going to start sort of on the fly, throwing things in the mix, you're going to be doing that for all your other projects as well. And that is just not a good process to follow, councillors. Councillor Noonan is next up, then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Look, I think this, I'll stick to, actually, I've got another note. I think any financial risk assessment should, as far as I'm concerned, if done, should be done once we are settled on the site. I don't think it makes any sense to actually jump the gun and do it earlier. So at this point in time, I won't be supporting that because I think it's too early for that piece of work to be done because we don't know where we're going to be yet.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So probably just following on from Councillor Noonan's comments, risk assessment is a critical element to a project this size. And I mean, that's part of point 2, the original point 2, as part of what we did. I was looking through the old resolutions and I think there was only 3 that came forward and we ended up with 9. Because one of the key things we wanted to do was manage risks, manage our financial processes. And so I think part of what we'll see coming back is looking at how, because part of financial management is going to be the risk, because we know from other projects that there are a lot of elements such as, from COVID, from supply chain problems that will impact every project we do. So I think it's a broader risk assessment piece of work we need to do and will be happening.
Okay, we've got to put the motion, put the amendment. We've got a division. Yes, we know that.
So this vote is simply on number 2, the red paragraph on the screen in front of you, the amendment to the library decision-making timeline. So Councillor Rainey and Faulkner, apologies. Councillor Brand.
Nay.
Councillor Courtney. No. Councillor Bowater.
No.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
No.
Councillor Edgar.
No.
Madam Mayor.
No. I call for a division on the remaining parts as well.
Amendment is lost. Now we're coming to, does anyone wish to speak to the substantive in terms of, thank you, Councillor Noonan, and then I'll go to Councillor.
Thank you. Look, this is just, I see this as just aligning some work that's already been agreed to. It's a practical and pragmatic move, so I support.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I actually think the sooner we have information around our financial management processes, reporting and approval processes, procurement, etc., and governance approach, the better for the project and for all of us. So I'm very much supportive of that coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Sanson.
I'm just speaking against this. There is a great deal of concern out in the community around this project, and I think anything that we're doing to accelerate this without undertaking due diligence and prudence in relation to climate-related financial risk is going to raise a lot of concerns. We know that Lawyers for Climate Action are already scrutinising this decision. There are other groups in the community, and pretty much everybody who talks to me about this project raises concerns about this. And yeah, I guess I had hoped that by putting up the amendment that I did, it might provide some surety for the community and for those of us around the table. And as it stands, I'm not able to support accelerating this without us taking that lens.
Thank you, Councillor Sanson. Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through Mayor. I'm supporting the change on completion of negotiations out of there because I did be quite clear and quite adamant when we discussed this for quite a length of time that this should have happened from the life of the project from the start to the end. So on completion of negotiations actually nullified that. So I'm in support of this taking place all the way through. As it was pointed out, I feel that other points in the original recommendation of point 5 under best practice of the quality assurance framework for the life of the project covers off what I feel the lost amendment actually covers off. And I also feel that what we have in front of us will actually achieve what the community want, which is a project on time, on budget, and everything done to the best of our ability to provide them with a service that they are needing.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Up to Sosa reply. We are not accelerating a project to change any of our appropriate responses to climate change risk. There is no acceleration here to do that, so that doesn't represent what is in front of us today. We've had a prior report that went all through those issues and will continue, as Mr. Levertis has told us, that work will continue as the project proceeds, and we'll come back and do it as we go through, if we get through these steps here. So there is quite a lot of work that has to happen to actually get to the point where we have a land exchange, that we've agreed on those terms, that we've gone through all of the matters that would bring us through to the next run through that we do on the flood modelling work. And we've been very clear that that will be rerun, and as many times it needs to be as the project proceeds and gets developed. What we have from Mr. White is actually, I think, a really sensible move to say the issue for the library isn't going away one way or another. We still have to make a decision about a library. And so what he's trying to do is actually keep our community engaged where we know that the satisfaction with our library is, is an issue. And he's saying, right, let's keep talking about the future library. We want to be talking about the future library, and I can do that and respond to my community. It's what we want to do. And it's appropriate to be doing that at the same time as we're doing the parallel process with the land exchange. There's nothing mutually exclusive about doing that. In fact, there's benefits. There's no acceleration to try and move this project ahead of any other due diligence processes we're doing. That isn't what's happening. And councillors that were speaking in that regard, I just don't think that's not a clear understanding of what is in front of you today. So I'm just hoping that we can keep really, on good, solid, sensible, decision making at this table. We're very, very aware of what is happening in terms of the work that's going on for this project around climate change matters that are definitely being raised in all sorts of areas all around the country. But I think the robust process that we've gone through here is appropriate. We dealt with that part last week because that was a critical issue, and now we're on to the next piece here. So I hope you can support this today. Division's been called for.
So the resolution that you're voting on is numbers 1 and 2 on the screen in front of you. Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
No.
Councillor Edgar.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton and Councillor Rainier, apologies. Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. That is carried, 10 votes for, 1 against, and 2 apologies. Thank you. Councillors, we're now out of time for this meeting, so it's going to have to adjourn, I think, to another day. We need to have a lunch break. I'll have discussion with the officers about how we're going to approach that, but you definitely need to have a lunch break. Okay, and then we're coming back, I think, at 1 o'clock for a workshop session, so we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, and I'll update you later if we're coming back today. Had some